Have you ever struggled with your ToneX tone model sounding too loud or too quiet or just totally inconsistent? Well, you're probably not alone. I get loads of questions about how we can best adjust input and output levels on ToneX Software and ToneX Pedal. And I wanted to go today through a very detailed look at all of the possible places we can do this and how they're going to affect our tone so we can really understand this and come up with a workflow that's going to allow us to get exactly what we need out of the software or the pedal. So let's get right to it. So we're going to start today inside the software. We're going to start right at the beginning of our signal chain. And that is going to be, and you may see it here, our audio interface. Now I am using a Universal Audio Apollo X4. So I'm going to first and foremost have to set my instrument input level to something that is appropriate. Now there's a lot of school of thoughts about this. I don't want to go into this debate of what the best way to do it is. You can really do it however it works best for you. My choice is to basically set the instrument input level on my audio interface at a fixed level with enough headroom to handle any guitar regardless of the output level of the pickups. We have to be careful not to clip the A to D converters. This is going to be the only place in this entire video where we're going to be adjusting any input levels before the A to D converter. So I always have my instrument input level on my audio interfaces set for 11 dBu of headroom. So on something like the Apollo X4, that's going to basically be coming in and adding 1 dB to the instrument input level. And then I just set that and I leave it alone. That gives me plenty of headroom for any of the guitars that I use. I'm not in any danger of clipping the inputs of my analog to digital converter. And then I'm also going to get my tone models react to my different guitars. If I take a lower output Strat, it's going to react like that Strat does if it was plugged into a real amp, because I'm not going in and boosting that up to the point of almost clipping and then backing it off, and then grabbing a guitar with higher output pickups and then having to lower that again. I'm going to be able to maximize the character of that guitar into any tone model. So that's the first step. But keep in mind that any change you make to the level on the instrument input is potentially going to affect how your tone model sounds, because we're going to be hitting the front end of it more, therefore saturating it more. And I'll give you an example of that. Here I'm using one of the tone models from one of my latest collections and one of my all-time favorite collections. This is the JS Fried Plex LV and HV Ultimate and DI collections. This is based on my incredible Friedman vintage Plex amplifier. Sounds like this. Now, if I come into my instrument level input here, hear how if I crank it up, the tone model starts to saturate more. Now I can tell you, because I've made this particular tone model, that this sounds exactly like I captured it in the room and exactly how the amp was set. Because right from the beginning, I've always given anybody who's using my tone models the exact input level that's going to make it react like the amp actually did. Okay, so now that we've set the audio interface and we're not going to touch that, we're going to move into ToneX Software. Now, we're going to start from the very beginning of the chain and move on through, and then we'll show how that relates to the pedal afterwards. So we're going to come down here to the bottom right-hand corner, and we're going to have this little input control. This is going to be our global input trim, basically, is what it's going to be. It's defaults at 0 right here. And basically when we're playing this, something to keep in mind, these input meters down here actually read quite low. There's no actual measurement here, so we really don't know what this is telling us. Just because it's reading low doesn't mean that you're actually set too low. That's something to keep in mind. But if we did want to crank this up, now obviously this is happening after the analog to digital converter. I've gone into my audio interface. It's already been converted to digital and we're over here now. Now, if I turn this up, it's going to saturate the front end of that tone model. turn it down, things are going to clean up. So keep in mind when we touch this, and I never really use this control, but if we do touch this, it's going to have an effect on the tone model saturation because we're hitting the front of the tone model with more or less input level. So this control is basically happening before the tone model, before this little chain right here that we see up at the top. Keep in mind, this is not a savable parameter, and this is going to exactly equal the parameter on the ToneX pedal in our global settings called global input trim. And the reason I can say that is because the global input trim on ToneX Pedal, which we'll get to in a couple minutes, is after the analog to digital converter, which is something I talked about quite some time ago, which is a very important point a lot of folks didn't really realize. So adjusting that up or down on the pedal is not going to affect our signal to noise ratio. Okay, moving on from that then, we're going to move into the gain knob on the actual tone model itself. The gain knob is essentially going to do what this guy does right here. It is just simple, clean, post A to D converter digital volume or digital gain. So if I turn this up, let's say 15, and that's actually probably too high because the gain knob is not going to allow us to get up there. But let's go up around here. And then I turn this down, I come in here and crank this. It gives the exact same effect. Now, the thing about this is it's not measured in dB, so it's very hard to know whether those two are matched. I actually have a PDF available on my website, which gives you all of the settings of the gain knob that match in dB. So that's a very useful tool. But just keep in mind, the gain knob is not doing anything fancy. It's not mimicking the amp's gain knob of the amp that was captured by that tone model. It just simply isn't doing that. It's just adding more digital gain. So again, if we want to hit the front of the tone model with a little bit more level so it saturates more, this would be the place to do it. Instead of down here, this is not savable. This parameter is savable per preset. I could crank this up, come up here and save the preset, and every time I come back to it, watch the gain knob. It will be there. Now, I can always double click that, go back, resave that set there, and it'll save as well. So this is a much more useful control and does the exact same thing as this input level control, this global input level control over here. Now, we need to talk about the compressor because the compressor can be used as another gain control. Compressor in pre is going to be before the tone model. So any gain changes we make to it are also going to hit the front of the tone model with more or less saturation. So if I come in here and crank this up, even though the compressor isn't really compressing, we can still use it to saturate or clean up our tone model. Because it's in pre before the tone model. Now, if we put this in post, it's going to act very different. Turning this up and down is not going to affect the amount of distortion we get, but it is going to just affect the final output level of that particular tone model. So depending on how we have the compressor set, we're going to want to be careful. If we're in pre, the gain control will either clean up or saturate your tone model more or less. And the post will just be a volume adjustment. There's no right or wrong here. However you're using it is fine if it's working for your workflow, but we want to be aware of what it's actually doing. And this can be a big cause of people going, wow, things aren't sounding right. Sure, you have your, potentially your compressor in pre, and this is turned way down and you go, I'm not getting enough saturation, or maybe it's turned way up too high and now we're getting too much saturation, right? So we've got to be aware of that and keep that in mind as we're working through this. Now, another point, if we go over to the advanced controls, is also the EQ. In a similar way, if we have the EQ set to pre, then any boosts or cuts we make will be hitting the front of the amp model with more or less input. This would be frequency specific input, but it's still going to have the potential of either saturating our tone model more than we're expecting, or maybe cleaning it up more than we're expecting. So I'm oftentimes using my EQ in post, so I don't really have to worry about that. If it's set in post, all it's going to do is be an output volume. So basically we think of it as anything set in pre is going to affect the amount of saturation of our tone model. Anything set in post will just be output volume. So pre would be input into the tone model, post would be output. So another thing to keep in mind. We then move on to our model volume, which is the volume control here, either in our advanced controls here or down here on our actual amp interface. Now this is after the tone model. This is not going to saturate the tone model more or clean it up. It's just going to give us more or less output volume. And that would equate to exactly the same as having our compressor in post, if it's not compressing, and adjusting the gain control. So this gain control here on the compressor in post, if set just as, like I said, not actually with the threshold where it's compressing, this gain control is going to work exactly the same as this model volume. But again, these are savable parameters within the preset. So if we wanted a little boost in one, we could come over here, boost it up, save that as a preset, and then when we're out of that, we could have it actually saved as a little boost there. And if I don't like that, I can come back and resave it so that when I come into that, it's basically going to revert back to where I wanted it. So very, very cool stuff. Finally, on the way out down here to the bottom right-hand corner, we have our global output level. This is not savable per preset, and this isn't going to affect anything about the way the tone model saturates or if it cleans up. It's just going to be output level. If I turn that down, things get very quiet. If I turn that up, I'm going to get more output level, but it isn't actually going to affect the tone in any way of that tone model, whether it saturates more, because this is happening post tone model or after it. So now let's head over to our ToneX Pedal and see where all of these controls lie within ToneX Pedal so that we can also understand how it works on the pedal itself. So if we come over here into ToneX Editor, we'll notice things are laid out slightly different. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Obviously, we're no longer needing an audio interface. ToneX Pedal is basically acting as our audio interface in this case. My guitar is plugged directly into this, and then this is going to be feeding its outputs out to wherever we're going to be monitoring from. So starting at the beginning then, we can't really start in the same place as setting our instrument input before the A to D converters. And that's a very interesting point we need to understand here on ToneX Pedal. Let's come up to our global settings here. We can say global setup, and you'll notice here, the first tab, volume, we have our input trim setting. Now, this input trim is after the analog to digital conversion, so it is not going to do us any good to come in here and crank this up as far as getting better signal to noise ratio or anything like that. That's going to already be fixed on ToneX Pedal, so there's nothing we can do about that. So what I do here, and I've talked about this many times in many videos, so that I can use all the features on ToneX Pedal, such as dual mode as an audio interface, and not worry about clipping that portion of it, I set this to -3. Now that is going to be exactly like having my Apollo X4 interface set where I have it set, where it's 1 dB of gain added. That way, when I am using the software with the Apollo X4 audio interface as the front end, it's going to sound exactly the same as when I transfer that same tone model to the pedal, set at -3. Everything sounds identical, and I never worry about it or think about it again. We don't always want to be having to dive in here to our global settings, right? Scrolling down, finding our input trim, going in there and setting it, or having to deep dive into the editor here, into global settings, and changing that. That's a global setting. Leave it alone. There's better ways to deal with this once that's set to give you enough headroom to utilize all the features of ToneX Pedal. So there's the first step in the chain. And that is going to be exactly the same as this control down here. Post A to D converter global input trim. Moving on from there, then we come in and hit the gain knob. Now, this gain knob is just like the gain knob I showed on ToneX Software. So we don't have to go through and talk about what these do. We've already talked about that. This is just going to be the corresponding place on the pedal itself. So we have the gain knob here, but I also have that on the pedal itself right here. And you'll notice that when I move the gain knob, and you can see it written right up there, as long as we don't long press this and have the green alt showing, then we're going to be doing the top row of parameters. If we have this long press and the green alt showing, then we're going to be controlling the bottom row of parameters. So we want gain. You'll notice on the actual tone model here in ToneX Editor, when I move that, it's going to adjust our gain control, which we know is the same as that global input trim, doing exactly the same thing. Now, again, we have the compressor here that can be in pre or post, and we've already talked about how that setting is going to affect what this gain knob does. Now, we can dive into here and scroll down to these parameters. It's a lot harder to do on the pedal itself, but it is possible to do it a lot easier with the editor. Now, heading through that, we're going to have the model volume. Now we can control that very easily on the editor. It's a little more hidden on the ToneX pedal itself. We have to actually press our parameter button once, twice, and we get to model volume. We press it again, and now we can adjust that. And you'll see that when I adjust it on the pedal, the model volume on the screen goes up and down. That again is savable for preset, and that is an output level. So that's really kind of a cool feature to know about. Now from there, we head over to our master volume. Now that's going to be in an odd place up here in ToneX Editor. It's up in the top left-hand corner. You'll notice here when I move that, that's the final output block. That would be equivalent to this control right here on ToneX Software. And this is not savable per preset. And that's going to be controlled right at the end here with this knob. And you can see as I move that up and down, it affects it on screen where my cursor is. That is not, again, very important, not savable per preset. So we don't want to move this, save the preset. And I've seen a lot of people come back to it and go, well, why is my volume different? This doesn't make any sense. It isn't working the way I want it to. That's just our final output block. So if you really want to save an output to balance your levels of your presets, you're going to have to do that with your model volume, either from the editor here or come into our parameters right here and move that. That one will be savable. And we can come up here and hold to save that. And then we'll have that recallable whenever we need it. Now, obviously, all of this can also be done on ToneX One pedal, much easier in the editor as we can do proper settings without the little tiny knobs, but we can do a lot of control still from the pedal itself in global settings and whatnot. But I would really highly recommend using the editor if at all possible when using ToneX One. But these settings are all possible on there as well. I hope that that was helpful, and I hope that that was a concise look at it. I wanted to really go in depth and show people exactly what's happening through that signal chain as we go through, so that you guys as players can really get the most out of your pedal in the proper way. Because I do get a lot of questions where a lot of times folks are saying, this doesn't sound right and that doesn't sound right. And a lot of times it turns out to be one of these things that's causing them problems. Maybe they're using their compressor in pre, and that's affecting and messing up how that tone model sounds. So something to keep in mind. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that video. I really do hope it was helpful. I'm going to leave you today with the full-blown in-the-mix audio of these tone models I was showcasing today, the Fried, Plex, HV, and LV, Ultimate, and DI. These are absolutely killer. I've been getting absolutely incredible feedback from them. Everybody's been using them, is telling me how incredible they sound, and I have to agree, they're just a lot of fun to be playing. So I hope you enjoy the music on the way out. The links are below to these tone models if you're so inclined and want to grab a copy of them yourself. Thank you again for tuning in. Please like the video, share it with anybody you think would get some use or enjoyment out of watching it. Also, please subscribe to the channel. Hit the little bell notification, get notified when I put new content. I'll be back really soon with some more. Thanks again so much for tuning in. Ciao for now.